This podcast is supported by Secretly Society, a record club offering the best new albums in exclusive, limited edition vinyl colours, delivered to your door each month, with perks like free shipping, members-only discounts, and first dibs on rare finds. Secretly Society is a record club for new collectors and crate diggers alike. Sign up and become a member wherever you are in the world. Just head on over to secretlystore.com. Welcome to Secretly Frequencies, the podcast that lifts the lid on Secretly Group and tests the label heads on their own back catalogues. I'm Tom Davies, and I'm joined by my co-host, the music journalist and podcaster, Kate Hutchinson. How's it going, Kate?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to delving into the history of Dead Oceans today. I've been brushing up on my Khruangbin pronunciation for weeks now.
And it's sounding good. Now, in this episode, we're sitting down with two of the founders of Dead Oceans, Phil Waldorf and Chris Swanson. We'll be playing some songs from across the label's history while Chris and Phil figure out who they're by and share some label secrets.
I'm a journalist. I'm only here for the secrets.
Okay, before we start, here's a quick bit of background about Dead Oceans. Phil was working in New York for the seminal independent record shop Other Music and was general manager of Misra Records. He and Chris were longtime friends, and in 2007 they set up Dead Oceans, named after a Bob Dylan lyric, alongside Chris's partners in Secretly Group, Darius Van Arman, Jonathan Cargill, and Chris's brother, Ben Swanson. Over the last 15 years, it's grown to be one of the most prestigious independent labels operating today.
Their roster is really quite incredible. Since the Bloomington-based label was founded, they've put out albums by Phosphorescent, Bowerbirds, Akron Family, Mitski, Phoebe Bridgers, Japanese Breakfast, Khruangbin, Shame. I could go on, but we don't want to give them all away.
Let's see how many of them they're going to get right. Phil, welcome to Secretly Frequencies. And Chris, welcome back for your third go around.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, this is daunting. I can't believe I'm here.
Let's dive straight into our first song.
Let's do it.
Still my body till it's born alone. Her hair is soft and her breath is soft and her name is.
I mean, it's so obviously phosphorescent, right?
Hey!
I mean, that one's called My Dove, My Lamb. That voice, that broken down Southern accent from Matthew Houck, unmistakable. We've worked with him for so long over so many important records. What a privilege.
This is a good chapter for Phosphorescent too. I felt like there was just such a clarity of his voice all of a sudden came really into focus. The lyricism, I mean, he always kind of had the Southern Gothic lyrical imagery, but I feel like stripping everything back in a real significant way. And it also had this like nighttime feel. I don't know. And the album cover made it all come into stark relief. I feel like he's topless, right? And it's like late at night. Looked like it'd maybe been a long night. He's got this weary voice and he's got weary stories. It just lets your imagination, scamper off into the distance in a really beautiful way. I feel like the music that's touched me the most deeply is music where there's enough room given for my own imagination to kind of stack on and add layers to the onion. And he gave plenty of that,
When you put out this album, or right at the beginning of Dead Oceans, what was the vision for the label?
I don't know if Chris and I will have the same answer to this. You have to remember this label started, in a time before streaming, in a time before really even like downloads were a popular music format. And I always loved the experience of like going into like a record shop and you could buy things out of 3 or 4 different sections of the record store and they all somehow made sense together. And, you know, for me, that was always an impetus as a fan. It was so small at the beginning that it just was, I think it was us sharing our fandom with others and trying to create a platform for artists and voices that we felt like needed a platform. And it really wasn't more complicated than that. I think as we matured, we focused and you know, really understood the kinds of artists we could serve well. But I think at the beginning, it really was just it was an outpouring of fandom.
I mean, I think you nailed it. I think that record store culture, I think you're, like, if I go back to, like, you used to work at Other Music, you know, which was, I think, you know, my favorite record store in the world. And it didn't feel like we had even the audacity to think that we'd be signing future stars. It just felt like, let's put out great records by musicians who have distinct voices. And, you know, I think let's get on base. You know, we'll put out records that will be recognized by heads, some by some of the big sites. You know, that was definitely a pitchfork ruling moment. I feel like back then, like in the first like maybe 20 Dead Oceans releases, you know, we were proud because we got a handful of Pitchfork recommendeds. You know, it's like, okay, we're getting some points on the board, you know, but it didn't feel like, you know, we were going to have any runaway hits, you know. But then it kind of, over time, if you show up every day and do the work with really talented musicians and stick with them over the course of a 3-album arc, it's amazing to see how much those musicians can kind of grow into and actually seem they become stars. You know, Matthew is a case in point. You know, a few albums later, he was selling huge venues and a lot of tickets, and had it. You know,
yeah, and just had his, you know, what I would consider his breakthrough song for Zula. You know, just is now at a point where we're going to get gold records for it. I mean, that's an amazing achievement.
Wow.
For you know, like what was a pretty scrappy operation at the beginning. And I'm referring to both our operation and Matthew's operation at the time. It's Akron family. Everyone is guilty. Everybody's guilty.
Everyone is guilty, exactly, from 2009.
Feel the funk.
You know, you can't pick favorite children, of course, but I do hold this record dear as like a moment when I think we as an organization leveled up a bit. We, you know, it was one of the first times we had worked with real artist managers who had a big vision for a project. They were a band we were obsessed with. You know, we were such big fans already, and they were so well established that to feel like we were their second home, you know, after an amazing run on Young God Records, I just think it felt like a real big moment, I think, in you know, raising the bar for what we were trying to achieve with Dead Oceans.
I'd been working with you for a couple of years at that point, and that's the moment where it felt like Dead Oceans went from being the sort of like younger brother label of the group to, oh, this is really coming up.
Yeah, and it's also cool because it went into like the band was willing to kind of go into that jammy rock band territory in a way that had a deeply felt spirituality to it, an intellectual rigor. These guys were dialed the fuck in and at their peak. And, I think where they came from, like the albums they did on Young God were, like Phil said, revered by us and everyone on our team. And we were young godheads, we would buy all the records. And so to be able to step in with this band, kind of they were in their new era where they really wanted to shift gears. We felt the heat. We're like we were under pressure, but the album was worth it. God, they were so good live too.
They loved Bob Dylan and they loved the Grateful Dead, but they also loved Albert Ayler and John Coltrane and noise music and avant-garde classical and a breadth of things. And they were able to distill it into something that made sense on an album and in a live show. And that to me was just so inspiring.
Have they cropped up in other guises on Dead Oceans or any of the other labels? Because they're no longer together, right?
They disbanded. They all kind of went their own ways and had, different solo projects. None of them really as full-time musicians, but Miles, the bass player, passed away in like a freak car accident, 3 years ago now? It was really awful. Just really, really sad.
I think we all held out hope that they would maybe reunite at some point and make another record, and we would be able to be a part of that, and, now that that's not possible, it's just like the recorded works that are there, they have another layer of sacred energy around them.
They were a band that was a little bit ahead of their time. I mean, I think about, they were probably playing, the smaller UK and European festivals back then, the End of the Roads and the Green Mans and things of that ilk. But they were a band that before bands in our world were on the Coachellas and the Austin City Limits and the Bonnaroos, were ready for it. I feel like there would be a space today for them as this just live act that everyone obsesses over. And it's a little bit sad that won't ever come to fruition, although I'm not sure that was ever their intention. So, that's not for us to decide.
I was a lover, just cause I steal the things you hide, just cause I focus while we're dancing on, just cause I offered you a ride. Still I am not from Barcelona, no, I am not even from Madrid, I am a native of the north.
Toss man, baby.
Is that King of Spain?
It is, from The Wild Hunt.
Yeah. Christian, I think probably still does, but at the time really operated outside of the music industry. He was, he's a guy from a little town in Sweden. And so to build that trust and understand like what even a record label might do for him took a lot of work, but it was a really fruitful partnership. And he just was always focused on these incredible live shows that you wouldn't expect from person with just a guitar or collection of guitars on stage. It was, eventually it grew into something more fleshed out with a live band and all of that. But I don't know that there's anyone that can do, that we've ever had the privilege of working with that can do so much with an acoustic guitar and a voice.
At the time when Christian's Tallest Man on Earth's records were coming out, these were really, really big records for Dead Oceans, weren't they? This was, I think, the big leap forward sales-wise for the label. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it was the first time we ever sold 100,000 copies of an album. There were a lot of milestones that were hit with The Tallest Man on Earth. And in a lot of ways, it was really interesting because he was operating not outside of the music industry, but maybe alongside it. And so it was this amazing success story that we all got to enjoy while still doing it on someone's terms that weren't just purely commercially minded.
And did the US embrace him immediately with open arms? Because I can understand his reticence, perhaps. Somebody making this kind of music that they don't have necessarily kind of instant connections to through their roots and their heritage and their home country.
I feel like this is a case where we had a unique vantage point to watch it develop, and it started in small rooms and just built it, tour by tour by tour. And I think maybe the first 10 years, he never played a not sold out show. Like it was a meticulously planned and built campaign. It was pretty beautiful.
But it was authentic. It was like just such a real connection he built with fans first. And I think that served him well.
And it sounds like he's managed to maintain that sort of rare position of being a musician with mystique.
Yeah, 100%.
Authenticity is one of those words that gets thrown around quite a lot at the moment. And I just wondered what it means to you.
It's interesting. The artists that we partner with, we talk about what the character is that they are, which seems on its surface like it's rubbing up against any sort of like philosophy of authenticity, but I actually don't think it is, because it's more about like how people perceive, and because no one is out there showing everything, and you have to kind of choose how you reveal yourself and where you employ austerity or where you hold back.
It's almost like a human element to it. This is still very personal to us, and so it is very hard to work with someone who seems fake or is putting something on. I mean, that said, I think it's okay if there's a separation between a performer or musician can be authentically something on stage, and it doesn't mean they're the exact same person when they get off. I don't think those two things have to go hand in hand.
Let's fast forward to 2016.
The one and only Mitski. My body's made of crushed little stars. Like, how many Mitski lyrics would make for amazing T-shirts? I probably hundreds of them.
I'm sure if you go on Redbubble, you'll probably find 1,000 of them. Is this kind of Act 2 for Dead Oceans, the beginning of it? I don't know if it necessarily felt like that at the time, but it's sort of kicked off a new era for the label, maybe.
It was in a moment where there was, a number of new partnerships. I don't think we went into it with intention. It was as underground as everything else we were doing at the time. But it really reached people, and that's what was so exciting about it. So I remember my coworker, John Coombs, and I, he now oversees A&R for all of Secretly Group. We were just such big fans, and it was a real trust-building exercise. I think she had opportunities. We weren't the only label that were there. And John and I worked really hard to assure her that we were going to leave the dignity in the project, and it wasn't about pure commercial aspirations. It was about giving her a platform for what she wanted to do on her own terms. And luckily she put that faith in us.
There's a phrase that jumped out from a review somewhere or something I read about Mitski, which was millennial misery. Were you aware at the time this was a new lane that you were creating?
I do think we saw that. I mean, you would see it in the audiences, the emotional resonance, the holding on every word. And what you had to believe is that the 50 people in the front row who were packed around a little stage in a, dumpy DIY venue in Brooklyn could translate to 500 or 5,000. And it was just that innate belief that the emotional connective tissue was there. And I never doubted that she could speak to a large audience of people who felt something. I don't think I would have ever predicted how big it got, but it always felt like a wide open opportunity for her to grow and probably achieve goals that she didn't even realize she had at the time.
Was there an exact moment with Mitski for you where it suddenly became apparent quite how big this was getting?
When Be the Cowboy came out and it got all of the commercial press accolades you could ever want for a record. It felt like a consensus #1 album of the year. The shows kept getting bigger and bigger. Mitski was, felt like in like a very like indie or alternative zeitgeist. And so that was, I think, one moment. But then, the second moment was during the pandemic, when I think people were looking for things to connect to, and Mitski's music had a certain power, and her audience at that moment got a little bit younger. And, that people like to talk about, how TikTok affected her. And I just think it's less about TikTok as like an app and more about it's where young people were gathering and sharing and connecting, and Mitski became part of that.
Okay, let's dial up another track on the jukebox.
It's Japanese Breakfast, Roadhead.
Bit of a giveaway in the first line, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The minute I heard Everybody Wants to Love You, it was like, it was clearly within the, in the indie rock milieu, but it felt like it could reach more people. It reminded me of the 90s, with like the Cardigans or the Cranberries or the Sundays. And it just felt like it sparkled in a way, and the hooks kind of popped in a way that it felt like you could imagine it on the radio, you could imagine it soundtracking films, it just felt real.
Yeah, and it was amazing to see the arc of Japanese Breakfast. They went on tour with Mitski, and then Japanese Breakfast supported Slowdive, and then quickly went back and sold out the rooms that they were opening for artists that they were, friends with and had a lot of admiration for, and, quickly eclipsed any sort of notion of like little brother, little sister kind of thing that you might have imagined. I mean, it was like, it was a very exciting and well-deserved ascension.
Do you think that Michelle ever sleeps?
No.
Because, as we know, it's not just her music that's done incredibly well. She's had, a New York Times best-selling book. She's written video game music. I mean, there is non-stop Japanese Breakfast or Michelle Zauner stuff going on.
It's unbelievable. Now the list of things on her to-do list is remarkable. I mean, she's writing new music. She's working on some creative recording projects that aren't for the next album. Her book's been optioned into a film and she's working on that. And then you look at like the tour dates and she's doing her first book tour. It's utterly remarkable. I don't think she sleeps. To go back to the question you ask. Very, very little.
It makes me tired thinking about it. Yeah.
It makes me feel deeply lazy. Next up, it's a mega mix. It's 2 tracks for the price of 1.
It was quite early one morning, hit me without warning. I went to hear the general speak. Sometimes I think I'm a killer. I scared you in your house. I even scared myself by talking about Dahmer on your couch. But I can't sleep next to
It's Better Oblivion Community Center's song Dylan Thomas, and then Killer from Phoebe Bridgers.
We've reached the Phoebe Bridgers part of the show.
Here we are. I remember we were in some terrible, maybe hotel restaurant at South by Southwest, chatting with Phoebe, and she had her phone out and was just showing us all these ideas for, how she wants to use photography and images, and it was one of those things where you immediately realized it was someone with an incredible vision. I remember saying something to Phoebe that was utterly ridiculous at the time, where I was like, I don't know, maybe someday you could play venues that are like the size of, and it was some ridiculously small venue in the grand scheme of things. Maybe someday, Phoebe. And it's like, Phoebe absolutely grew right past that. And it was unbelievable to play like a small part in that journey.
I remember the first time I heard her, my friend John Strom was sharing her music, and I heard her the original version of Georgia that was on Pax Am, and it hit me. It took me back to when I was a teenager and early 20s and going to a lot of folk festivals, and I was in love with Dar Williams and Sean Colvin, and her voice just it hit me. Fast forward a couple years and hearing Smoke Signals, it leveled me. And then I ended up meeting her in Los Angeles and going to emo night at the Echoplex and having my mind blown. My first emo night. Thank you, Phoebe. And, this kind of all preceded the South by Southwest that Phil talks about. But then, over the course of that time, hearing the first album, and then, once I heard Motion Sickness, it was like, holy cow, with that backbeat, it just felt like kind of a powder keg moment musically caught on tape. It's been so beautiful to watch it develop and to watch her build what she's doing. And then to start a new label with her, Satisfactory Records, has been an absolute blast. It's crazy to going back to like those early first impressions, and you have no idea. You just never know. Like when you meet someone, how they might factor into your life. It's pretty incredible.
Wait, so are you going to be fighting with Phoebe over which artist to sign now?
No, there's no fighting.
I also think, Satisfactory Records, but also, Better Oblivion Community Center, it speaks to Phoebe as a music fan. Phoebe is someone that is omnivorous. Her music vocabulary is deep, and obviously it shows in her own music, but, her love of what Connor and Bright Eyes do, led her to playing in a band with Connor, and it was a beautiful record that I think was very freeing for both of them. It was for all the right reasons. It was just a celebration of song and an opportunity to collaborate and do something a little different, and it helped open the door to bringing Bright Eyes into our world. I think we have to give Phoebe a lot of credit for opening that door for us as well. I don't think it's something, we would have ever imagined.
Do you get a lot of your artists teaming up like this and just saying, hey guys, we've got this little side project. It's a bit sort of an ambient drone, psychedelic rave, but how about it?
I wish it happened more. It's beautiful when it does happen, that's for sure.
I think those things are best, I mean, to, go back to a word we used earlier, but I think they're best when they're authentic. I think it's less likely to work when, one of the suits at the record label is like, you do this thing well and you do that thing well. Why don't we put you into a blender and see what happens? It's more like you introduce people, you let them connect, and if it happens, we're there to support it. But it's not our place to force those creative conversations.
But if anyone listening does have a psychedelic rave side project that would be right for Dead Oceans, please do get in touch.
Yeah. I'll give you Tom Davies' cell phone number.
Yeah, great.
It was the triumphant return of Slowdive.
22 years in the making.
Yeah.
How on earth did this come about?
If memory serves, their manager, Rob, got in touch and just said, hey, there's new music on the way. Are you interested? And then for me, I was a teenager. I'm going to date myself here. I was a teenager in the early 90s, and I went to see Blur play a show at the old 930 Club in Washington, D.C. It was a 200 capacity, tiny little club. And I had never heard of the opening band, and it was Slowdive. I'd never heard music like that before. Blur were kind of this other, like, sort of more jangly pop thing, and Slowdive were this wall of sound. And so when that became a possibility, we were fans, and the record was absolutely tremendous. And it just was like a complete no-brainer.
This track, No Longer Making Time, it was about the band coming back from a split, coming back together, and about that sort of bittersweetness of reforming the band. So did you have to approach it in a slightly different way at all?
I don't really think so, because they had done shows already. They had sort of overcome the part of getting into a room together, getting to re-know each other. The first time I saw them as like a reunited band, I actually, they were playing New York, but the night before they were playing the new 930 Club in Washington, D.C. And I was like, I should go, and that way the first two times I've seen Slowdive 20 odd years apart is at the 930 Club. It felt like a funny, like a little treat to myself. It was amazing. I got there, and their tour manager, Steve, met me there, and he was like, oh, the band are all out at the Smithsonian together. They are a band that enjoy each other's company. They have inside jokes. They are real friends. It isn't like this like idea of like a reunion cash-in. They're doing it for all the right reasons. And it was remarkable. I mean, it was great to meet them, and they're just an absolutely amazing bunch. And I think it felt really honest. And, if it wasn't fun, I think they wouldn't be doing this.
Now, they weren't the first UK artist that was partnered with on Dead Oceans. There have been a few others. Maybe it's worth mentioning Bill Fay at this point, who you'd also worked with, and was another artist that had a very long gap between records as well.
Bill Fay is an artist whose first two albums were really big for Phil and I and a lot of people on our team. And it was like one of those crazy cold emails to get out of the blue when Joshua Henry wrote us, because I think he'd heard somewhere that we were fans.
It was via John Mulvey at Uncut.
Yeah, and he reached out to say that he was working on this pretty elaborate new Bill Fay project, the first in a few decades, and would we be interested in hearing it? And we tripped over ourselves in order to have that conversation. Bill's music is kind of deeply important to me personally. I know to Phil also. To me, like Bill Fay is like a Nick Drake that hasn't really had that big commercial moment to really cement him in the canon of the highest order that I think someday he'll be. Bill's a real one.
I feel lucky for all of this. It's ridiculous. We get to do this every day, but there's a higher purpose with Bill. I feel like he's just so remarkable as a kind and just generous person, and the fact that we're lucky enough to have anything to do with his body of work it's a gift. This is music I wake up for in the morning. And I feel like we're doing a really important service by trying to bring his music to a wider audience. He deserves it, every bit of it.
Are there any more legends that you want to bring back? Whose career would you want to restart?
Where is Roland Gift? What is he doing? Roland Gift needs to make an album.
I don't have a great answer for that one. I mean, I think it's someone who's not gone and is very present and actively touring, but I think a modern contemporary version of a new Willie Nelson record could be remarkable. Collaborating with the right musicians and producers and getting a little bit outside of the country music comfort zone. I think he's still a remarkable guitarist. His voice has so much character and depth, and yet the way the albums are produced and approached, it's a little bit of a formula. And I think you could shake that up and it would be a really special thing.
You need to get down to his ranch, Phil. Go and knock on his door.
I know.
Tell him.
Exactly.
Okay. We're going to move on to another track now. This is from 2020.
Khruangbin. So good.
Yeah, that's Khruangbin, So We Won't Forget.
This song follows me round everywhere. Whatever I play on YouTube, this song, it comes on afterwards. What have you done?
I think it's your exquisite taste that's causing.
I'll take it.
You're not the only person I've heard say that. And I think it's their wide appeal. They're true, deep record heads. And at the same time, it sounds great in a restaurant. And those two things very, very rarely intersect. I can think of very, very few artists like that. Maybe like an Outcast or something. It's the rarest of qualities. I heard them in a friend's car, and I was like, he must be playing some old vintage Thai funk compilation or something. This is from their something from their first album, Universe Smiles Upon You. And then Laura's voice came in, and I was like, nope, this is contemporary music. And I was just like, what the hell is this? It's remarkable. Like, what does everybody think? And Chris, you had just heard it, and it was sort of like dots were being connected, I think.
Yeah, my friend Alex at Warp played it for me. He's like, I think you'll dig this, and it's pretty groovy. And he put it on, and I was like, holy shit. It was, and I left with a CD. It didn't feel like something that could cross into our universe until once I found out that Phil was digging it also. I was like, okay, there is a connection. Some of the biggest projects and biggest, zigzags we've made have involved taking risks in like how we self-perceive what our capabilities can be applied to in the weird vagaries of hipster culture and what's culturally cool and relevant, and this one took some squinting. There wasn't really an archetype to look at, to point to, other than like, hey, this is, this is profoundly beautiful music. This would be fun as hell.
You created the ultimate litmus test. Do you dig it?
Do you dig it? Is it groovy, man?
When I saw them live for the first time, and I mustn't be the only person to think this, when I saw them live for the first time, the main thing I was thinking was, has Tarantino been in touch yet? Them playing live is just a club scene in a Tarantino film. It has to happen.
Kill Bill 3.
Yeah, I can't confirm nor deny whether that's happened. However, I can say that that's part of the beauty of it is that you can imagine that. And at the same time, they could be the best DJs on NTS. And you really can't say that about anything.
For our next track, we're sticking in the UK and heading to South London. Here's a song from 2021.
Shame.
Yes, Shame. Alphabet. What an exciting band. You've been working with them for, the third album is about to come out. Tell us a little bit about how you started working with Shame and how exciting it was at the time.
It was something that Adam Nealon brought to us. He's in our London office and he's got amazing taste and he's not someone that sits at the buffet of A&R like sampling everything. He finds something and he goes all in for it. And he's so good at contextualizing, and we're both across an ocean, explaining the culture, explaining why this is important. Because, on the surface, it's music that I really understand and am a huge fan of, but why this one?
I can just imagine that phone call when Adam was like, so hey Phil, there's this band from South London and they've got this night called Chimney Shitters, but it's great. You gotta hear it.
It's pretty much something like that. I remember meeting them and like them doing a rehearsal in their shithole practice space and just kind of meeting them and sort of seeing what they were all about and how real it seemed and they were young at the time. I mean, I think we forget, like, they were teenagers when we met them, most of them. And it was visceral. It was, it felt like things that I loved when I was a teenager. And I could see how it could connect in that capacity, but I think they have an incredible point of view and have been able to push far beyond, a genre or like a niche of a genre. And in a lot of ways, what excites me about a band like Shame, and I think hopefully this is a thread that's true of almost anything that we work with, is they don't have just one kind of fan. Like they're a band that is steeped in punk culture that's making music for people who like all kinds of music, not people who are just steeped in punk culture.
And this was a scene. I mean, do you remember, 10 years ago, maybe a bit more, scenes were dead, for want of a better word. I'm using scene for want of a better word. But, that everybody thought that the social media age had wiped that out. And this was something that was tangible with lots of bands that shared a vision, hanging out in the same area, sharing rehearsal spaces. That's so exciting.
Yeah. And here they are, like, signing to a record label with offices in, Bloomington, Indiana, and like who would have thought? Like it's amazing. I don't think that could have happened in the Creation Records days.
They were one of those bands when on their first South by trip where the word was just coming back to us in London whilst that was going on, that every single one of their shows was just mayhem. And that seemed to be the vibe of the entire American tour they were doing. Mayhem everywhere.
I suspect that's one of the last times that'll ever happen at South by Southwest, unless, that festival props itself back up and, harkens back to what it once was.
Okay, we're going to hear the last song now.
Oh, we've made it so far.
We have, and you've got everything right so far. I'm sure you're going to get this one. It's from 2022.
Got 'em right between the shoulders, and the bull loses word. No fight left to give. Can't pull his head up.
Wednesday, Bull Believer.
What a great song.
There were a few of us at the label who were huge fans of their album Twin Plagues. It was music that resonated. But some of it was imagining how we could help give them a platform. And once we met the band and saw them live, I think we quickly realized that it was more than just a sort of DIY indie thing. Carly, the front person in the band, it felt like she was a voice of another generation of music fans. I am massively inspired by it. It's as I get older, it's exciting to see the audiences get younger, seeing the connection between her and a young, like late teens, early 20s fan base. And it reminding me of, why I got into music in the first place.
When I watched the video for Bull Believer, it took me right back to being a teenager, because I used to try and rock that look with the black lipstick. And she pulls it off amazingly. Like, it took me right back there to those kind of, I called them the Grebo years in the early 2000s. And also, I just think that guitar is so chunky. I loved it. It felt like a real breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so exciting and just exciting to see good things coming to good people. Watching, us announce this album, and their first London show is sold out, and it's 5 months away, and they've never played in the UK before. Like, this is it's all going as I think I would have hoped. It feels really, really exciting. And I love that, when something speaks to me and then it speaks to culture as well. I mean, I obviously that doesn't happen every single time with artists, but it's very, very rewarding and affirming when it does.
So that album, Rats or God, is out on the 7th of April. What else is coming up for Dead Oceans?
I'm really excited about the Duran Jones has got a solo album, which he's been working on for a few years, deeply personal, with some really talented musicians from Indiana. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think obviously they've been hinting at it on their social media, but hopefully Slowdive are putting the final coat of paint on another album. We shall see exactly when it's completely finished, but I can see it on a horizon line, and that's very, very exciting.
You didn't have to wait another 22 years.
Nope.
Phew.
Yeah, we got through it.
We're recording this at the time of the Grammys. You're going to the Grammys this week.
It's going to be fun. It's going
What
to be
are you
a lot
wearing?
of fun. I've got myself a new suit that it'll fit all of me. I'm excited about that. And we're going early for the pre-televised event. Hopefully Yaz will win a couple, and then going to go to the televised event, and then we're having an after party over at Gold Diggers. It's going to be a gay old time.
I'm protesting the Grammys this year because I thought they should have kept it permanently in Vegas. That's a little bit more like the right vibe for the absurdity of all of it. There's nothing better than the Grammys in Vegas crashing into each other. So I'm skipping Los Angeles this year, but I'll be back. I had to make my. I'm sure the Grammys will hear my complaints and reconsider the location for 2024 and beyond.
There are so many more artists we could have played from across the Dead Oceans roster, not least Kevin Morby, who will be getting his own Secretly Frequencies on an upcoming episode. But for now, I think we've come to the end of this episode with Dead Oceans. Thanks so much, Phil and Chris, for taking part.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Secretly Frequencies. Thanks to Phil and Chris from Dead Oceans, and to Kate for co-hosting. You've heard music from Phosphorescent, Tallest Man on Earth, Mitski, Phoebe Bridgers, Khruangbin, Shame, Slowdive, Japanese Breakfast, Better Oblivion Community Centre, and Wednesday. You can hear all these songs and more on our playlists via the link in the show notes. You can also buy albums from across the Dead Oceans catalogue on secretlystore.com.
The Secretly Society podcast is an original production of the Secretly Group. This episode was produced and edited by Holly Fisher and exec produced by me at House of Hutch. The project manager for the Secretly Society podcast is Mimi Gontar. Robbie Morris is the creative director. Look out for more from the Secretly Society wherever you get your podcasts.